I'm very happy. All of our family is here tonight. You know, there really aren't three dreams. There are four. And we're all here to sing that song for you. Effie.
Deena, Effie, and Lorelle form a musical trio called the Dreamgirls. When ambitious manager Curtis Taylor Jr. spots the act at a talent show, he offers the chance of a lifetime to be backup singers for a national star. Taylor takes creative control of the group and eventually pushes the singers into the spotlight. However, one becomes the star, forcing another out, which teaches them about the high cost of fame. What's going on, y'all? So, y'all, I'm so excited because this month is Black History Month. And what I decided to do was highlight some Black movies because I think it's really important for us to take a moment and discuss the things that are part of our culture, the things that represent us. The first movie on this list is Dreamgirls. And I know you might be thinking, like, oh, why Dreamgirls? Why did you decide that you wanted to talk about Dreamgirls? I don't know if y'all know, but in January, when I'm actually recording this, in January, there was this like trend going around of people, mimicking Lorelle when they were singing Dreamgirls in the movie. And it's such a fun trend. Everybody got in on it, including Anika Nani Rose. And it just made me so happy to see that this movie is still so beloved and remembered. And it really warmed my heart. And it made me think, I want to talk about that movie because Dreamgirls, it really was like back in the cut because that movie came out in 2006, Christmas Day 2006, actually. And I promise you, it was one of my favorite movies. I wore that movie and soundtrack out. I was 15 years old, and baby, when I tell you between Heavy Heavy, Dreamgirls, Cadillac car, I was eating that movie alive. Do you understand me? I had made up in my mind that I was about to be, I was gonna say one of the dreams. I don't know what I was gonna be. I was gonna be somebody, and I was gonna I'm somebody, and nobody's gonna hold me down. And if you don't know, that's a movie from a song from the movie. It's not like a big song, but there's this part. Anyway, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Y'all, I'm so sorry. Whenever I talk about this movie, I get so excited. You have no idea. I genuinely love this movie, and I think that it's one of the first ones where I got so excited to hear that. I love musicals. I don't know that you would know that because I've never told you. But like Disney movies and all of that kind of stuff where there's any kind of singing, whatever else, performing, I love those kind of movies. And Dreamgirls did not disappoint. So if you don't know, Dreamgirls is actually based on a 1981 Broadway play that starred Cheryl Lee Ralph, Loretta Devine, and Jennifer Holliday. Baby, they weren't coming to play with that cast. They said, listen, we have a stacked cast and we are not finna worry about standing back in the background and hoping that everything works out. They said, we are coming and y'all are going to hear us. So the 2006 movie stars Beyonce and Anika Nani Rose and Jennifer Hudson. Baby, powerhouses. And those are just the dreams. Then you get Eddie Murphy, you get Jamie Foxx. Like, they had singers for this movie. And so you know it's gonna be good. Listen, y'all. Y'all know usually when I say I'm not gonna take a long time and I'm not gonna describe the movie scene by scene, that I end up doing it. But this time, I promise you, I'm gonna try my hardest not to do that. We're gonna see what happens. I'm just gonna say we'll see what happens. So the movie starts out, and we are at a talent show of sorts. We are at this like competition, singing competition, and that's when we're introduced to Deena, Lorelle, and Effie. So they're getting ready to go out. And I'm just going to kind of summarize it. I'm not going to go into depth, but one of my favorite parts of this scene, of this like opening, is when they're looking in the mirror because they see these people around them, and like some of the other female talent, like they are like dressed up, right? They have some really nice costumes, really nice hair, things like that. And so my girls are dressed in like these orange burlap sack looking dresses. I like, I think Deena said her mama made them. I don't even know. I don't remember. All I know is my girls looked like they were getting ready for Easter service. And Deena gets the smart idea to like turn the wigs around. And they looking at her like, what? Deena is like, turn the wigs around. And they turned their wigs around. And I was like, Nadina, baby, what did that accomplish? Because right now, y'all just look like I got some backwards wigs on. But that's neither here nor is it there. And Curtis is watching them, and he bets against them. He like tries to pay somebody to make sure they don't win. And the man is like, they weren't gonna win no way. And they go out there and they sing that song. And when I tell you they ate that song up, the song is called Move. And when I tell you they ate that song up, I'm not even gonna sit here in front. That was probably, it was up there in the movie as some one of my favorite ones because the way Jennifer Hudson was eating and singing lead. Anyway, so they get done, and Curtis is like, essentially wants to be the manager. Eventually, they get connected with Jimmy early. They start singing back up for him. Him and Lorelle start up a little something, something. And there's a scene where Deena is talking to Lorelle, and she's like, Lorelle, how could you? And Lorelle is like, I'm 18. I am a woman now. I said, not a woman, Jesus. So through their escapades working with Jimmy, they go out on the road on tour. Deena low key ran. I think she ran away from home. Like Deena actually ran away. Like her mama was asleep, and I remember her mama sleeping on a couch. And I don't know that she was, but I remember her mama sleeping on the couch. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that scene because you know how it is when you watch a movie, because I watched it, for this. And genuinely I remember that woman sleeping on the couch. But that's neither here nor there because we had to get it how we lived. And she's like, because she know her mama wasn't finna let her go. But she went out on the road. She said, baby, I got a dream and I'm finna chase it. So while they out on the road, that's when Lorelle and Jimmy, start up their little romance. And I had before this, what happens is like they record this song and it's called Cadillac Car, and they hear it on the radio and they are so excited. And then this white group steals it, and they're like, whatever. So there's one part of the movie where they're singing this new song, and Jimmy wants to hear them sing it, is round and around. And so he's like, he wants to hear them sing it. And he goes to them, and Lorelle is like, round and around. And I was like, okay. And then Deena does her little round and around. I was like, yes, ma'am. I'm not gonna do what Effie did because the way it's gonna spike in everybody's ears. But he was like, "Oh, I knew you'd have it." I was like, "Yeah, she cutting up. She was cutting up real quick." She said, "Let me show y'all how singing is really done." So the music starts really taking off. They start playing, different venues, things like that. Around this time, Curtis and Effie actually strike up a romance. But then you can see that he's kind of giving Deena like preferential treatment. We can kind of see where that starts to seep in at a certain point. And then there's one point where Effie is talking to Curtis's sisters, and I don't know if this was a part of the play because I've never seen the play. But it was such an, I don't know. I feel like when I was younger, I was like, am I supposed to be laughing at this? Not that it wasn't like funny. I just felt like, what was the point of it? Where Effie is holding up a copy of Dr. King's speech, and she like on a vinyl record or whatever. And she's like, I can't even get a whatever. And a amateur like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gets his own record. And then she like everybody's looking at her like, girl, what are you talking about? And she's like, and I was like, what? What was the point of this? Y'all, I promise you, I am. I was like, what? It was so funny because I was like, girl, I remember thinking at the time, I literally remember being like, what was the point of this scene? But anyway. So we see them on their rise. We see them on the come up. We see, they're really successful with Jimmy. They sing this one song called "I Want You, Baby," and when I tell you, that's actually what leads to the conversation between Deena and Lorelle. Baby, when I tell you Jimmy was cutting up, that man's like, like he was showing out. And Lorelle she was just eating it up. Baby, she was looking at that man like he hung the moon and the stars. So eventually, it's time for them to go solo. Like we knew they were gonna go solo at some point because they couldn't be backup singers for the rest of their life. So this is when Curtis makes the decision that Deena is going to sing lead. And this is a decision that really, really impacts their life, all of their lives. Like this one decision changes everything because Effie just kind of assumed that she was going to be singing lead when they eventually went solo. But here's where, okay, here's where I have a really weird relationship with this movie because Effie got screwed over. Let's just be honest about that. Effie got completely screwed over. And at the same time, from a marketing standpoint, I'm not a marketing expert or anything like that. I think Effie's style of music versus what Deena would be able to produce, I understand why Curtis wanted Deena to sing lead. Like I really hate to admit that, but I feel like from a marketing standpoint, they may have been able to kind of go into markets that they wouldn't be able to if Effie was singing lead at that point in time. Because I feel like Effie was very much making music for the soulful types, whereas Deena's voice was a little bit more. Now, I'm not talking about Beyonce's voice. Let me make that distinction. I am not talking about Beyonce's voice. I'm talking about what Deena as a character is supposed to be giving. Because y'all know they said that Beyonce had to like hold back for the movie, and I was like, girl, if the way she sang Dreamgirls was her holding back, then what was she planning on doing? Because even at that part, Mama was already showing out. So, what kind of holding back was she having to do? That's what I love so much. Is like every time I think about that, I'm like, so Beyonce is holding back. But then when you see the audition that she did, the audition tape where she's singing it, and she's singing completely in her head voice, I was like, okay, now this I can understand is her holding back. Girl, anyway, I just thought that was a fun little tidbit. So Effie is having her moment, right? Because this is when Curtis has told them that Deena's gonna sing lead. And y'all, I'm trying not to laugh because it's not funny. Because there's one part where Effie is like, "You can't put me in back, Curtis. You just can't." And Lorelle is like, "You'll be back there with me. We can do a few oohs and ahs." And Effie kind of looks at her like, "You've got to be stupid." And it's like, it's not supposed to be that funny, but for some reason, it really just tickles me. And then so Cece convinces her, and then they all sing "We Are a Family," and she goes ahead and she, relents. And so they have their debut, and they sing Dreamgirls, and Beyonce is cutting up as usual. And then when it gets to Effie's part, baby, you can tell Effie said, "I'm gonna have my moment in the sun too," as did Lorelle. Lorelle is kind of like me. Lorelle is just happy to be there. Lorelle is just happy to be included. I'm living my dream. If I gotta stand in the back, that's perfectly fine. That's what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna live my life. So as time kind of goes on, this is when Curtis is starting to really show Deena that favoritism. And it's not just favoritism anymore. Like it is. noticeable to everyone involved. But Effie is the only one who's really outspoken with it. And when they're singing a song called Heavy Heavy, which again is one of my favorites, the song itself is shady. And I think it's really important to point out the fact that Effie's brother wrote this. This wasn't like something that some person over off and over there wrote. Like this is something that her brother wrote. And at one point in the song, it's like, come on, baby, better lose some weight. And Deena looks over at Effie, and I was like, oh my God. And so Effie is like really out singing because she's trying to overshadow Deena. Not even necessarily overshadow, like she's trying to like take over. She's being shady with being louder than Deena. And so Lorelle is standing there with her finger in her ear, like, and I was like, Lorelle, hush. Lorelle, hush. Be quiet. Like, get out of this. This ain't your fight. But then later on, she does tell her, I'm just as much a part of this as you. So they're performing Heavy Heavy at CBS or like on CBS or whatever. And Effie is noticing that all the cameras are on Deena. Like, no, none of them are on her and Lorelle. It's only Deena. And so she walks out. And Curtis is like, you better get back in there and do it. And she's like, or what? And I was like, not or what, baby? Not or what? Not we went from never met a man to or what? Mm. So we find out that Effie is actually pregnant. They don't say it necessarily when we find out. She just goes to the doctor. She kind of gets a piece of paper and she's like, and then she goes to tell them it's New Year's Eve. And she goes to tell everybody, or goes to tell Curtis anyway. And she gets there for the performance, and Cece is like, well, why don't you just go wait in the dressing room? And she's like, it's New Year's Eve, baby. I got to get ready. And he's like, well, I thought Curtis was going to come talk to you. And she's like, come talk to me about what? And this is when we had a big confrontation. This is when, like, everybody comes out. So that, like, all the stuff that's been brewing under the surface, this is when it comes out, baby. This is when it hits the fan, if you know what I mean. Everyone's airing out their grievances against Effie. Effie is basically like, oh, so this is the game we playing. And then at one point she's like, I'm not feeling well. I've got pain. And everybody's like, Effie, we all got pain. And then Michelle, who was brought in as Effie's replacement, even she gets a little shady because Effie is like, who did you to put out to get in? And I was like, oh, not put out, not you calling her a hussy. And Michelle is like, now you watch your mouth, Miss Effie White. And I was like, oh, not no second rate diva who can't sustain. I said, oh, baby, she was eating Effie alive, low-key, quiet as it's kept. But her and Deena, baby, Deena was going in. And then Lorelle tried to get in between them, and she's like, this is between Deena. Effie was like, this is between Deena and me. And Lorelle was like, baby, I'm just as much a part of this thing as y'all. And you ain't finna kick me out. I was like, oh, girl, this is messy. I was like, child, if this was real life, my nerves will be bad. Because when I tell you eating each other alive, and Curtis is talking to her like she's a stranger. Curtis is like, I knew you were trouble from the start. And I was like, you've been bouncing up, down, and around on this woman. And you got the audacity to say you knew she was trouble from the start. So she sings her song. And she sings, and I'm telling you, I'm not going. And she's trying to, let him know, like, baby, I'm not going nowhere. And she's begging him to stay low key. And she's apparently, there's a line where she says, we're part of the same place, we're part of the same time. We both share the same blood, we both have the same mind. And I remember when I was younger, I was thinking like, so are y'all related? Are y'all like cousins or something? And we didn't know that, but she's talking about her baby. She's saying like, we both share the same blood like inside of us. And I was like, okay, anyway. That was actually a smart line, but I was like, girl, I'm not doing this. And it doesn't work. Curtis still walks off. They come out, they have their debut, and from there the dreams like are skyrocketed into stardom. They surpass Jimmy. Like Jimmy is a star, but the dream Deena Jones and the Dreams are the star. And yes, they changed their name to Deena Jones and the Dreams. let me tell you something. I didn't know this about Diana Ross because I was trying to avoid bringing Diana Ross up because, like all the comparisons that are, brought up about it. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is because I didn't know that Barry Gordy had actually changed the name to Diana Ross and the Supremes so that he could charge for two separate acts. Baby, smart. So as we go on, things have changed. I'm gonna kind of ramp it up at this point because, baby, I'm not gonna be talking about this forever and a day because I know y'all got things to do. As time goes on, Jimmy's drug habit is getting worse and worse. The dreams are getting bigger and bigger. He's starting to really see them eclipse him. And there's one part where he's performing this song and he drops his pants on stage. And Curtis fires him. Lorelle breaks up with him. His wife walks out, and it's just like the man's fortunes just turn horribly. Before this, though, Deena is watching a movie, or she's watching this thing like in her basement, I'm assuming. And it's like Deena, Lorelle, and Michelle, and she's looking like, that ain't what happened, but I'm hush. And she's, is basically saying like they had a dream and blah, 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 blah. And they're going through their career and when she married Curtis and whatever else. Yeah, that hussy married Curtis. And it gets to this one part and it's like she'll be starring in this new Cleopatra movie. And she goes to talk to Curtis because she's like, I'm too old. She's 16 for most of the movie. And Curtis is like, you'll always be 16 to me. And I was like, that's probably a little creepier than it should have been. But I still feel like it was really creepy and we just kind of moved past it. And I'm not sure. I don't I'm not saying that, oh, we need to cancel the movie. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we need to cancel it all because I'm saying like from a character standpoint, the fact that he sees her as a 16-year-old, I think is very telling because he sees her as someone malleable. He sees her as someone he can still control. He sees her as someone that he can still manipulate. And I was like, girl, you in danger. So Lorelle and Jimmy are still having their affair. And at one point, Lorelle is trying to pitch this new song. Lorelle and Jimmy are trying to pitch this new song called Patience. And I don't like that song for some reason, but I don't remember why. Like when I listened back to it, I was like, oh, this is nice. And then I was like, why didn't I like this song when I was younger? But anyway, and Curtis is like, no, thank you. No, no, thank you. And so, like, Jimmy goes to do some drugs right there. And Lorelle is like, and Lorelle runs out. And he's like, okay, well, I don't know what to tell you. So that's when we get to what I described earlier, like a little bit later, was the scene with him dropping his pants and all this and that. So Jimmy's fortune takes a horrible turn, and then unfortunately, he ends up, losing his life. So by this point, the music just does not have any soul anymore. That's what CC feels like. CC feels like the music just has lost its luster. They're actually performing or recording one song and listening back to it when they find out. And Lorelle goes outside and baby, she just screams. Like she just starts screaming. And then this was a cute, cute moment that I wish we had gotten a little bit more of. Not that part, but after that part, Lorelle and Deena are sitting in somebody's bedroom and she won't let me see him, Deena. She won't let me see my Jimmy. And I think at that point it's easy to forget that Lorelle and Deena have been friends since they were teenagers. Now here's the other fun part about this movie is that this movie really takes place like they're like 16 or 17 and then it takes place over the course of like 9 almost 10 years. So I'm thinking like they're not that old by the end of this movie, but for some reason I kept thinking they were like 35 and they're really not. They're probably like 26, 27, somewhere in there. And I don't know why I remember them being so old. Maybe it's just because I was 15 and I thought the world revolved around me, but I remember them being like 35 for some reason. And I was like, no, they're still, like now going back and watching it, it looks like they're probably like 20. Anyway, that's not the point. So at this point, we're, nearing the end of the movie. Deena is trying to get out on her own. She's trying to start her own career. She's trying to be independent, even of Curtis. Curtis is not letting her. Apparently, he is notorious in the community for keeping a strangle on Deena, and to the point where she goes to meet with these movie execs about a character, and they're like, is Curtis gonna let you do this? And she's like, my husband will not be a problem. And he berates her for it. He finds out that she had, and he was like, the secret meetings by the pool, and she's really trying to strike out on her own, and he will not let her. So Effie, at the same time, Cece has come back and he wants her to record this single that he wrote specifically for her. She's very reluctant, but she does it. Effie has been going through her own struggles. Like, she's been trying to get back into the music scene, but nobody will let her because she's notorious for apparently being very hard to work with. She has that reputation. She doesn't really want to do anything other than sing, so she's low-key giving up. She has her daughter and she is taking care of her. And I mean, that's kind of it. Like, you can tell she's a little bit, I don't want to use the word bitter, but kind of is bitter. And apparently she got a large sum of money after she left the group, and she just went through it all and is basically destitute now. But meeting back up with Cece and this new single, she's able to sort of revitalize her love for music. But that's when Curtis comes in, and Curtis is like, I own the rights to everything that you write. And he has Deena in the dreams to, do another version of it, to record it. So when Deena finds out, she calls somebody, child. I don't remember who it was, like not the FBI, but somebody. And they go through all his personal effects, and they find out about all the tax fraud and everything else that he been doing for years. Baby, Deena read him down without ever opening her mouth. So Effie tells, because Deena was like, I'm sorry, Effie, I didn't know what he was doing to you. And Effie is like, she reveals that they have a daughter, because Deena's like, Effie, you have a baby. And Effie goes, Magic's not exactly a baby. She's almost 9 now. And Deena, who up to this point was almost looking like sometimes she didn't know what was going on around her, is like, she puts the pieces together and is like, oh my God. And if it's like, Deena, he doesn't know. And so it was a moment, because Deena really wanted a baby, but Curtis would not give her one. Curtis was like, this is not the time. You don't need one right now. Your career is still going. So he denied her the, option of being a mother. So Effie gets her, retribution, whatnot, and we go on from there. And then the final scene of the movie is, I'm just gonna summarize it and just say, the final scene of the movie is Curtis seeing Magic, and then it's the dreams coming together for their final performance, because they're about to break up, or break up as a group and then go their separate ways. But then Curtis has the audacity to bring his new girlfriend to this. Like, are you serious right now? Because at this point, him and Deena have broken up. I'm telling you, it's a mess. So overall, this movie really is good. And even though I may have given some of the events a little bit out of sequence, I hope you get a good gist of what the movie is. To me, I think that one thing that really made this musical as a movie, and then I'm sure as the original play, so special, was the music, because the music really ties into the story. Whenever someone gets screwed over, We Are a Family plays. Like, even when Curtis fires Jimmy, right before that, the dreams come in singing We Are a Family. And oh my God, Beyonce held the most beautiful note when she did that. Oh Lord. Anyway, I'm just gonna hush. I'm gonna be quiet. And I feel like the music also kind of reflected how the movie was progressing, because at one point Cece feels like the music has lost its luster, it's lost its soul, like it's not what he set out to write. And there's one part where they're singing this song and it's step, step, step on over. Now, I love that song, me personally, but he feels like it's just generic. He doesn't feel like it's any kind of anything special. And I feel like the song I probably would have said that on is when they were like, I'm somebody, somebody, and nobody's gonna hold me down. That was the generic one. That was the one where I was like, girl, why are we going down Sesame Street to start recording this music? But also, that goes back to what I was saying with Deena and Effie, where I feel like Effie's voice was special for a certain time, and Deena's voice was sort of, at that point anyway, I feel like her voice was sort of like the future, quote. And I hate saying that because I don't think one sounded better than the other necessarily. I think it's just they were suited for different things. And Effie was kind of like in one lane where I feel like Dina's voice could kind of go where you needed it to go to be successful. So that's just me. That's just my little take on it. Now, one thing I did notice in this movie, I used to think that Effie was just being difficult, Effie was just being bitter, Effie. But then as I started getting older, I'm like, no, I would have been quote unquote bitter myself. Like I would have wanted all of them to like fall down a ditch. Like what you telling me that I'm one of the founding members of this group and you gonna kick me out? Girl, goodbye. And as time goes on, I'm not gonna say Deena was a villain necessarily. I'm not gonna say Deena was a villain. I am going to say that Deena was young and misguided, and Curtis tapped into her desire to be a star, and that overshadowed her friendship. That's what I'm going to say about that, because I do think it's important to note, like, Deena was very young when all this started. And even by the time she starts getting attention from Curtis, she's still very young. So, I mean, that's just something, keep in mind. Because Curtis really had this girl's head like pumped up. And speaking of Curtis, Curtis is the slimiest person in like probably most of the movies I've seen. Like he really is just horrible. He plays them against each other. He chooses one over the other and shows favoritism. He does all this backhanded stuff trying to just get more money and constantly like seek fame and success and this and that. Even when he did bring that girl to the Dream's final performance, it's like it was such a smart move in and of itself to like introduce her at such a high profile event. But it's like from a personal standpoint, your ex-wife slash wife that you still married to is performing in her final performance, and you bring your new girlfriend who's young. Like, and then the thing is, I use the word young. Deena was not old. Deena was getting close to 30, probably somewhere around this time, but Deena was not even 30. Like, she was still young herself, which lets you know, like, Curtis is always looking forward. He's never, even when he's in the moment, he's still looking to the next thing. So he's constantly searching, searching, searching. And that, girl, don't get me started on this because I will sit here and I will go off on this man. I feel really bad for Jimmy because Jimmy I feel like Jimmy and Effie really get the raw end of the deal. Like they really get the short end of the stick in this movie. The only thing now in the play, Jimmy survives. Like Jimmy lives. But in the movie they, decided to, have him lose his life. I don't know how I kind of feel about that. I feel like I get it, but at the same time, it's like I don't know. So I just really feel bad for them because I feel like both of them are the same, where their sound and their voice was stuck sort of in one era, and it just didn't translate well to like quote unquote current times. And even when it did, it was like, I'm sick of doing this. Like, I don't want to make this kind of music. I want to do what I actually want to do. So that's why I say, like, for me, I just feel bad for him because I feel like he was constantly trying to look for something, look for that next break. And then it had to have been hard for him, for his backup singers to then surpass him and, their career skyrocket where his essentially stalls. So I felt really bad for him, but baby, he had Lorelle sprung. Do you understand me? When that woman said, I am a woman now, she meant that. She meant that with her whole soul. She said, baby, listen, if I want to roll around in the sack, roll around in the hay, I can do whatever I want to do because I'm a woman. I said, Girl, all these women this man done had, and you think you special? Okay. But then he really did become her longtime companion. Cece is another character that just even if I feel like Cece's role isn't necessarily highlighted to where you realize he's low-key part of the problem, but he really is part of the problem. But even him like betraying his own sister, it's like you can kind of go back to the fact that he was young-ish too. But again, he betrayed his own sister. Like he told her, like, girl, you got to get up out of here. And then he stayed in the musical world. He stayed doing what he wanted to do and basically told her, like, girl, I'm sorry, but you got to go back to Detroit. I was like, oh, okay. You're a little bit better than me because I couldn't let my sister just, flop. And I'm gonna go on to, stardom or behind the scenes stardom, chum. But I said, okay, that's that's you. So, like I said, he is definitely part of the problem, and he is just as much to blame as Deena and Curtis. Like he is not escaping those allegations. But overall, even through all the kind of negative stuff that happens, I do think this movie is fun. I think it's one that people will enjoy. I think that it's one that you can sit down and you can watch a million times and you can find something new every time. You may blame Effie for her own issues one time. Then you go back to Curtis and realize he was the problem. And then you may go back to Effie. Like there's always a different point that you can make and you can find in the movie. And then my favorite thing about it though is the music. I think that the cast worked so well together. Their voices complemented each other and the music that they made together brought them to life. I really think that the music that the characters would sing reflected them. And just the way Deena was singing sort of these pop songs ish, like it was R&B. I don't know what word to use because I'm not like a music aficionado, but like Dreamgirls, heavy, heavy. Even when they sang their version of One Night Only, I mean, it was all these kind of songs that like Effie would have had to sing it a completely different way for it to fit her voice, which I think is, again, part of the point of the whole movie is like her voice wouldn't have fit the way those songs were written. But, alternatively, a lot of people prefer Effie's version of One Night Only because it is more soulful, it's more deep, it's richer. It has both versions have meaning to it, but I feel like Effie's version is the one that it's like heart-wrenching when you hear it. Hers is definitely about, like baby, we got to live in the moment. Like right now, this is all I got to give you. Whereas Dina's version is like it's giving one night stand. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but Dina's version is giving one night stand. And one last little comment that I do want to make about this movie. I feel like we got a chance to see everybody grow, uh, almost except for Lorelle. Because I do think Lorelle grew up, but I almost feel like Lorelle was just sort of Lorelle the whole movie. Like we got a chance to see Deena kind of go from being this insecure little girl, excited about the world, and then she is a superstar, but what is she gonna do with this fame? To being like, okay, I can do this. I know I can. We see Effie go from being really excited to being depressed and then go back to being excited. Lorelle is just kind of like middle of the road the whole movie. And I know that she's not like the focal point. Don't get me wrong. I just feel like it would have been nice. I feel like it would have been nice to get a little bit more from her. But I don't know what I would want because I feel like we didn't have time for that because everybody else was doing like stuff, like huge stuff, and like her storyline was mostly Jimmy. So, well, her and Jimmy. Let me go back. Her and Jimmy. So it's like I don't know. I don't know. That's just a little nitpick. I'm not saying that that's going anywhere. It's not even something that I would necessarily change about the movie. It's just something I wish we had gotten. If that makes any sense. Like, if I had the opportunity, I probably would not change the movie for what it is. But I also wish that we that we had it. So it's like, I don't know. It's weird, a weird thing for me to say, but that's just my personal take. So y'all, If you have made it to the end of this episode, I appreciate you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much for supporting me. You can find me anywhere on social media at They Call Me Mr. G. You can find me there on TikTok. You can find me there on Twitter. You can find me there on Instagram. You can also find me on Instagram at Mr. G Reviews, which is where I post a lot of my TikTok videos to Instagram. And that's also where I post a lot of promo for this podcast. I am so excited to tell you that we have a Patreon. So if you would like to join me on Patreon, you can find me at The Power of G. Now, there's a free tier where you can subscribe and just get, updates, things like that. But we also have a $1 tier where you get early access to videos, you get shout outs, things like that. And there is more to come. So if you would like to support me on Patreon and you are able to, then please feel free to head on over. And your support is much appreciated. So speaking of our patrons, I would like to go ahead and give a moment to give them a brief shout out. So thank you to Catherine, Nix, iBuffy, Blake, Brianna, JD, Leah, Ro, Derek, Keita Nicole, Jason, Zay, Ronica, Justin, and Prince Sky. Their support has made all of this possible. And if you'd like to join that rank, then I'm just telling you to head on over. We be having us a humdinger of a good time. So thank you guys so much. And I can't wait to share the next movie review with you. I'll see you then. Bye.